All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Todd Stieritz. That's S-T-I-E-R-I-T-Z, and I'm with the Montgomery County Department of Public Safety. We're going to start out with some introductions of the individuals who will be speaking to you this morning. So we'll start with Christopher Schwartz. That's S-C-H-W-A-R-T-Z, Chief of the Barron Hill Fire Company. Next, we'll have Christopher Ward, W-A-R-D, Chief of the White Marsh Township Police Department. And finally, Commissioner Kenneth Lawrence, Jr., that's L-A-W-R-E-N-C-E, Chair of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. We're also fortunate to have a number of agency representatives with us who will be available for questions following the initial remarks. First, J.C. Toll, Vice Chair of the White Marsh Township Board of Supervisors. Rick Meller, White Marsh Township Manager. Andrew Thomas, White Marsh Township Fire Marshal. Rebecca Werner, White Marsh Township Ambulance Chief. Wayne Masters, Chief of the Spring Mill Fire Department. And John Fields, White Marsh Township Public Works Director. From Montgomery County, we have Lee Soltesiak, the county's Chief Operating Officer, and Brandon Purcell, Chief of the Hazardous Materials Response Team. From the state, we also have Ben Russell from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Finally, we'd like to thank our federal and state elected officials, many of whom have sent staff to assist us this morning. So to start, I would like to turn it over to Chief Schwartz from the Barron Hill Fire Company.
Thank you. Good morning. Chris Schwartz, S-C-H-W-A-R-T-Z, Fire Chief, Barron Hill Volunteer Fire Company. At 4:55 a.m., the White Marsh Township Emergency Services were dispatched to Stenton Avenue and Joshua Road for a reported train derailment. Initial reports indicated that 2 to 3 cars were derailed. During the response, Montgomery County Urban Search and Rescue, Montgomery County Hazmat, Montgomery County Drone Resources, White Marsh Ambulance, and 6 mutual aid volunteer fire companies were dispatched to assist. Montgomery County drone operators located the 15-car train derailment on the Norfolk Southern rail line between Flowertown Road and Joshua Road in White Marsh Township. Incident commanders coordinated with hazmat specialists on the potential for a hazardous materials leak. Rail consists indicated that the train contained 2 empty tank cars, 5 cars containing urea, which is a liquid fertilizer, and 1 car containing tetrachloroethylene. Out of an abundance of caution, incident commanders evacuated 12 nearby residences. The residents were evacuated to a nearby school building in the township. Volunteer firefighters arrived on scene and conducted a reconnaissance by foot to the scene. They were able to locate train personnel and safely evacuate them from the area as well. Train and hazmat personnel remained on scene and determined that there was no active hazardous materials leak for many of the rail cars. 1 car that contained plastic pellets did break open and spilled next to the railway. These pellets were not hazardous. At 9:28 a.m., the evacuation order was lifted and the residents were allowed to go back to their homes. There were no injuries reported in this incident, and the scene has since been turned over to Norfolk Southern and CSX teams to continue their mitigation efforts. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christopher Ward, Chief of Police for White Marsh Township, WARD. Following the response by the fire companies, our fire marshal's office, our local ambulance, and the police responded in support to assist with the evacuation. With the support of the Colonial School District, we were able to remove the residents from 12 residences within the evacuation area to White Marsh Elementary School on Joshua Road, again, out of an abundance of caution while we investigated the matter. We had road closures on Joshua Road in the area of the spill and had some effect to highway materials and Sunnybrook Golf Club. They were both closed, again, out of an abundance of caution to make sure we knew what we were dealing with. As the fire chief explained, once we were able to turn the incident back to the railroad companies, we were able to clear the evacuation and open the highways. Going forward, there will be, we believe, limited impact on our highways and our residents as they do the recovery of the train. The plan at this time is to use access from the highway materials quarry into the accident site, and they will be able to stage their equipment and access that area and therefore not affect our traffic pattern or our residents. Mr. Lawrence.
Good morning, Ken Lawrence, Chair of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. As you've heard, at 4:55 a.m. this morning, our Emergency Communications Center received a call for a train that had derailed in White Marsh Township. Shortly thereafter, township officials requested representatives from our Department of Public Safety's Emergency Management Division and UAV team at the scene, as well as a full team dispatch of our hazardous materials response team. Our UAV or drone was used to locate the train, as well as to perform recon on the extent of damages. The members of our highly trained hazmat team then walked along the tracks, inspecting the rail cars for signs of damage and checking for any leaks of material that the train was carrying. The county always stands ready to assist our municipal partners with the coordination of and response to incidents like this. And on behalf of the county, I'd like to thank the Barron Hill Fire Company, White Marsh Township Police Department, White Marsh Ambulance, the County Department of Public Safety, and all of the first responders who worked diligently over the past several hours to protect the safety of our citizens. I'd also like to acknowledge Governor Shapiro, who has sent a representative, Congresswoman Dean, Senator Hughes, and Senator Fetterman for all sending representatives to assist. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'd be happy to take questions.
Does anybody know why the train tipped?
At this time, Norfolk Southern Police are still investigating that, and they are, once they secure the trains, they'll have better information on that. The train was equipped with recording information, but it needs to be downloaded and viewed, and they haven't been able to do so at this time.
So who monitors that? Is that local authorities, NTSB, the county, the state, or can they come up with how it happened, they're fixed, and then just walk away since it's technically private property? Will there be any kind of official reports?
For the accident, the NTSB has been notified, and the NTSB will be responding to oversee that, along with Norfolk Southern's own police department and other federal agencies.
Were there any indications before the derailment that the train was having any issues or that things were slick? Any messages that were sent or indications ahead of time?
Not that we're aware of.
Is there a concern that this is weather related at all? If there was mud or dirt or?
We don't have that information at this time, and anything we would say would be speculation at this time.
So when the train lines become running again? Go ahead.
What kind of oversight is there during the cleanup, or whatever you want to call it, with Norfolk Southern and CSX? We saw East Palestine, there was a lot of concern about how things were handled without oversight. Do you guys have people
The
there?
Department of Environmental Protection from the state of Pennsylvania will be having oversight on the recovery. On a township level, we're making resources available to them, but the oversight would come from the Department of Environmental Protection.
Is there any concern about an environmental risk? Can you just say your name again for us?
Sure. It's Ben Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L-L. At this time, there is not a concern for any environmental releases. We are working with both the railroad and the quarry below, just in the chances that something could occur during the cleanup phase, but at this point in time, everything is contained that is a hazardous material.
What are plastic pellets and what are they used for in this specific case?
Well, I can't speak to exactly what these pellets will be used for, but the pellets that breached would be just polyethylene raw material for plastics manufacturing. So I don't know what the customer, where they were heading, what the customer would be, but they're used in plastics manufacturing for all sorts of stuff.
Where did the train start and where was it going?
I'll leave that up to you guys.
It was heading west. We don't know where it started. We don't know what its eventual endpoint was.
You talked about, the railroad said 40 cars total. Now, we've seen where cars are labeled, with, I think, propane gas in them. Are you saying that those kinds of cars were empty at the time? Even cars that didn't flip? The train, obviously, you've got the derailment scene, and then you've got the cars that extend behind. All of those cars have been checked. Any hazardous materials in those cars?
Not that we're aware of any of the.
I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, all the cars in the back half.
Hold on 1 second.
Sure. All the cars in the back half of the train, all the LPG cars, they're all loaded cars. The hazmat team was down there. They checked them. They were not leaking. The railroad's going to be relocating them back to the Morrisville yard area where the train originated.
And then the trains that did derail, that flipped, that had material in them, what's being done when they're righted and taken wherever they're going to make sure nothing in them spills as well?
That's going to be work being done by the railroad cleanup contractors themselves. Their plans are still being developed on how to transload the materials. I mean, it's difficult access, so they're still trying to work all that out right now. And we'll be, once I'm done here, I'll be going over to meet with the railroad again to firm up those plans on accessing the site and transferring materials.
What's
And you're kind of
urea?
the point guy from the state. You're
Yeah.
the one who's monitoring
What-
it. You're going to be there watching all that.
Correct.
What is urea? You guys described 5 cars with urea. in it.
Right.
What's that?
It's, like was said previously, it's primarily used as a fertilizer. It's also used as a raw material in plastics manufacturing and other industrial uses. But again, I don't know what the destination was going to be for these cars, so I can't speak to the exact use of this material.
But the urea didn't leak.
No,
right?
nothing's leaking except the polyethylene
Is
pellets.
urea, are you concerned, if urea, is that the hazardous material you would have been more concerned about had that leaked?
No, the car we're working with, coordinating with the quarry and everything, is the tetrachloroethylene car. That's the one that more people have concerns with. The urea is not a concern, but we're obviously watching the handling of that as well. I mean, it is perched right above the quarry, so.
That car didn't tip. The one that you're concerned about did not tip.
I mean, are they upright, that one? That one's at an angle, isn't it? Brandon was down there.
There were several overturned rail cars, either on their side or perched on an angle off the trucks that they sit on.
Could you just go through again what is in each of the ones that were impacted in some way?
Yeah.
I think you gave a little bit of a rundown, but I was not sure that the numbers match up.
Yeah, I'll let Ben go over the consist.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So you had referenced, there had been reference to 15 cars.
Right.
What's in each one of those?
Sure. I might defer to the people behind me because it's been a long morning and I can't say I've memorized everything, but there were 5 urea cars, tank cars. There was the polyethylene pellet covered hopper car. There was a tank car of tetrachloroethylene, and I believe the rest of the cars behind there were all empty trash containers.
And the tetrachloroethylene, what is that? What does that do?
It's an industrial degreaser. It's also used in dry cleaning. It's got various uses, but I can't speak to the exact use. Again, not knowing who the customer was and where it was going exactly, I can't give you more detail than that. It's got a variety of industrial uses.
But that was on an angle. That one was the one on the angle but did not break.
It's close. Yeah, everything's contained in the car, but it is, sitting not like it normally would. So that's why we'll be.
Flammable material?
No, tetrachloroethylene is not flammable. It is potentially toxic, though, and that's why we're obviously watching the handling of it. It is a placarded toxic material.
Is the urea being a fertilizer, is that flammable?
No, urea is not flammable either. So at least not significantly that it's placarded in any way. So it doesn't have any placards.
Here?
I'd say it's better than what it could have been, of course. Yeah, I mean.
So then who determines when the trains will be up and running again?
That would go back to the NTSB and the owner of the track, Norfolk Southern. They would have to come to an agreement. First, they have to clear it, and I'm sure we'll have interaction with them. Norfolk Southern, who is not here, did send information. One of my, Lieutenant Mack, has that information for a contact for Norfolk Southern for all of you through their communications division, which is in Atlanta.
But they're not going to be able to be running until the NTSB says so.
Yes.
Yeah, the FRA is here as well. So between the two.
You mentioned that some of those pellets spilled. Do you know how much?
I couldn't give an approximation. It's hard to see.
We can tell you how much is on the car. If you
Yeah.
want to know that, I can get that number.
Who's the manufacturer of the pellets? car was the only one that was basically said it's got like a tarp over it. It's not like the actual steel or whatever the car's made of cracked open and things came out. It's an exposed top.
No, it's a covered hopper car. No, no, come on here.
So it's a covered hopper rail car, which is, it's got hatches on the top and hatches on the bottom. They're usually loaded from the top, emptied at the bottom. So when the car, I didn't look at it, Brandon could speak better to how it's breached, but it could have been, the bottom that opened up, but there's pellets sitting outside of it. The total weight of the car is 190,000 pounds. So that'd be, it's a lot of pellets that are gonna need to be cleaned up. And that'll be something we'll be watching with the railroad as well to make sure all that's getting taken care of. So.
What's the closest tributary to the spill site?
Well, the quarry ultimately drains out to the Wissahickon Creek. I think, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes.
local guys, but I think
correct.
it might go to Lorraine Run first. Does it go there first?
Yeah, it's
So those are the receiving waterways from what the quarry pumps out below the train derailment. That's where that water goes.
Gosh, did any
So.
pellets actually get into the waterway itself?
As far as I know, they're all up on the hillside on the rail track. So, yeah.
How would you describe this next phase in terms of the cleanup process? Are there potential dangers in this phase where something might be exposed?
I mean, whenever you're moving large metal rail cars, there's always a potential for issues. That's part of why, they have very experienced contractors on site. All the companies that are here have done this many times before. So I don't have any immediate concerns in that regard. But, we're going to maintain oversight just to keep an eye on things and so that we're prepared. We've already worked out a plan with the quarry that, has to maintain pumping. So we already have contingency plans in place if they have to stop pumping because there's a breach up the hill. We don't want that obviously going out into the Wissahickon. So that's all being worked out in the background right now, where there's a lot of meetings going on in regard to that. So all that stuff's being taken care of.
Is the county held harmless in terms of cost here? I mean, there's been an outlay here by you folks. Do you get reimbursed somehow? Somebody help you out later?
Any expenditures that the hazmat team were to accrue, we would go to the responsible party, so in this case, CSX or Norfolk Southern. But as far as any other agencies, I don't know what the reimbursement would be. We have to check. But as far as hazmat team goes, we're allowed to hold responsible parties accountable for reimbursing any equipment, manpower, time like that.
You don't know what that is yet, do you? Or do you?
At this time, no. No.
Have we remembered any similar situations on this rail line in recent history? Can anybody recall any other incidents like this?
No, I've been employed here for 34 years, so if that's long enough, no, we haven't had any other incidents of this nature with derailments or anything like that.
What's the timeline of what people should expect now in the coming hours and then days?
Well, before we left the scene, there was already, the rail lines will mobilize, my understanding is 3 recovery teams and 3 environmental teams. We had already seen 2 of the environmental teams in the area staging, and one of the recovery teams. It is their intention, due to the commerce on this line, to try to have the line back up and running. I think the last was by Wednesday evening. So they want to move through this methodically but quickly to keep the commerce moving on that rail line.
Just a trained question. I'm not sure who would be the best one to answer that. But in terms of when you are carrying on freight trains, when you're carrying materials, material that could be hazardous and material that could be concerning, are there certain things that are in place to keep them from tipping? Are there? Does that make sense?
I understand where you're coming from, and unfortunately, I mean, there's not really any kind of special safety mechanisms. The railroads deal with placement of hazardous materials within the train consist. They have certain rules set out by the FRA that they have to follow for that. But when you have a derailment, there's no airbags on the side of the train car that are going to pop and keep it upright or something like that. Unfortunately, so that's why we always have to watch carefully when these things occur so that we don't have any secondary issues after the initial. If the initial derailment didn't cause an issue, we have to watch closely to make sure there's not one later. So.
What time was the actual derailment, and was there any lag time between the actual derailment
We don't believe there was any lag time. I believe it was heard and the rail, we got multiple calls from a business that was open in the area, some residents, and shortly thereafter from the train, I don't know if it was CSX or Norfolk, but they notified us immediately. The lag time would be minutes at most.
How many people were on the train at the time, the CSX employees?
We believe it was a regular crew of 2 or 4 moving the train. Again, we moved them away, none of them were injured.
Was there any damage done to the integrity of the actual train track itself?
I can't answer that at this time.
Chief, is there some sort of speed regulation through there? They have to go at a certain pace or a certain, they have to slow down in there, anything you know?
Again, my officers aren't out there clocking them, so I have no idea. We don't have radar, but that's a whole different argument.
That's a whole other story.
Yeah, so.
Is the township notified regularly when there is a train coming through with hazardous materials on it? Did that happen in this case?
We're not notified regularly. We know that line runs and it's an active line. As far as like emergency services, we plan for it. We do get updates if they change what they're carrying on the train, but that would be on not on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you
Again,
planning another update of any kind that we do road?
no, we're not. We're hoping that we will not need another update of any type. We're hopefully this will just go into their recovery effort and be as non-impactful as possible to our community. And again, Lieutenant Mack has some information if you need it for Norfolk Southern's contacts.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ben, you're with the DEP?
Pennsylvania DEP, yeah. And just before we came in here, I got a text message saying that Norfolk Southern's PIO is on a